Hi, it's Jerry Roberts back with another edition of Newsmakers TV, Journal of the Plague Year. Today we have Delaney Smith from The Independent and Josh Molina, who writes for Newshawk, with us as usual. Nick Welsh still on special assignment. Okay, let's start with the pandemic, which has suddenly come back into the number one spot on the news, local news front. Santa Barbara County, sort of a microcosm of the state of California right now. We got exploding cases. We have a high percentage of, we have more testing, but a high percentage of the tests coming back positive. Delaney, give us the kind of the status quo. Where are we? Not status quo. Anyway, state of play is what I'm trying to say. What's the situation?
I just want to start over, Jerry. You made like 3 errors. You want to just redo it?
No, I'm good.
What's going on with COVID in Santa Barbara County is the question. It's not looking very good. We've had the last few days have had almost, it seems like almost every day cases are doubling. The amount of new cases. Our hospitalization rate is higher than it's ever been. There's over 60 people hospitalized countywide. As of yesterday, there were 20 in ICUs. So our surge capacity, we're having pretty extreme troubles to the point that, we had to roll back what we've already opened. That's what we were kind of expecting. They did kind of a partial rollback, though. We didn't fully go back to phase 1. Some things are still open. You can still go into an Old Navy and go buy a new outfit. But you know, but you can't eat inside of a restaurant, but you can't eat outside of a restaurant. So it's kind of like a weird hybrid of what phase 1 and phase 2 openings were. And then the big thing that's been on everyone's minds is the beaches, of course. Santa Barbara in general is a destination spot for going to the beach, but especially on 4th of July weekend. And then that is just compounded with the fact that Orange County, LA County, Ventura County all closed their beaches. So our beaches were now the spot to go to. I mean, on top of that, although our local government finally, like yesterday, just decided to say we're going to close beaches to anything except for water sports and exercise. You know, even though they finally just said that, if you look at things like Visit Santa Barbara or any of these tourist and business organizations, literally as of yesterday, they're posting on their social media and on Instagrams, come visit Santa Barbara for the 4th of July. Here's how you can stay safe and visit us.
Well, I mean, and understandably so, because, you know, the guidance we were getting from local government was not the clearest.
Yeah, take Kathy Murillo, for example. Let's get
that. Yeah, Josh, take Kathy Murillo, for example. You said, I mean, it's really been this total clown show. There was this multi-hour hearing at the city council about whether to keep them open or not keep them open and blah, blah, blah. And then the next day, well, you explain what happened, because I still don't understand what happened. Josh?
Well, it's very frustrating. I mean, it's so frustrating that it transitions into humor, because it's really the only way that you can cope with it. The city council spent about 4 hours. They actually were so flustered by how to handle the beach closure situation that they put it off until the end of the agenda after 711 Milpa Street. And that was a significant item in itself. So they spent the beginning of the meeting talking about whether to close the beaches. And then Kathy Murillo, I mean, and I say this objectively without any bias, she really needs to brush up on the Brown Act, because the amount of times that Ariel Colon had to remind her, hey, you're about to you're talking about stuff that's not on the agenda. And she just kept going and going and going. And so finally, her compromise was, okay, let's make a motion to put it on the agenda. Here's the deal. Kathy Murillo was lobbying super hard to not close the beaches. She said over and over several times in the meeting that we can't close the beaches. The science, the public health officials, they say that you get COVID in your home, in closed quarters. You don't get it outside. It doesn't transfer. It doesn't carry over. And so we need to keep our beaches open. This was the theme of her council comments, okay? She was practically shaming the other council members, Oscar Gutierrez, Alejandra Gutierrez, Kristen Sneddon. She at one point said, this is what I
Smartly,
think.
the three of those are the ones who voted to close the beaches, we should point
They're the ones who voted to close it. At one point, she told Alejandra Gutierrez that, I believe the public health officials, and if you want to believe something else, then that's your right. And it's sort of like, Kathy, that doesn't make any sense. Even the city hall gadflies, the people who call every week to criticize everything about what the city does, they even know to close the beaches because it's better to be safe than sorry. And she's somehow defending that we need to keep them open. So fine, that's her perspective. But what's infuriating is that she posts on Facebook, yes, I am lobbying the county hard to close the beaches for the holiday weekend. At least ban people from setting up umbrellas and chairs. This is exact opposite of what she was saying on Tuesday. It's mind-boggling. I don't understand. I asked a question at Public Health. Why did we change when we were just promoting on Instagram, the county was, go to the beaches? I don't understand what's going on behind closed doors. It's frustrating. We know kids learn this from a very early age. It's better to be safe than sorry. And
Delaney,
we're dealing with a global pandemic. These are not hard questions. These are the easy things.
All right,
These
Delaney,
are
I'm in on the Josh for Mayor campaign. I'm ground floor here. Huh? Better safe than sorry. Josh Molina for mayor. I kind of like it. It's got a ring to it. It's got a ring to it. But in all seriousness, it is extraordinary that they would do this. You have the chief infectious disease doctor at Cottage. This is from an independent story saying the virus is running rampant.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, physicians at area hospitals, they pretty much, any of them that have spoken about this have all said that this is horrifying and that they would close down everything if they were the one who had that power.
Do we have any, go ahead, finish your thought, I'm sorry.
Well, it's like Josh said, I don't understand what's going on behind closed doors. Something is. I asked yesterday too at the press conference, what are local epidemiologists projecting for 2 weeks from now? They did that with Memorial Day weekend, what they thought was going to happen 2 weeks from now. Like, what are they projecting now? And they kind of sarcastically were like, not able to answer the question. They're like, you mean models? We don't do models on that. And I'm like, why do we not do models on that?
Everybody, yeah. The other thing that I was a little baffled about, so they have this 4-hour debate, if you want to put a generous frame on it. And then the next day, Paul Casey, the city administrator, says, I'm invoking my emergency powers to close the parking lots. Why didn't you do that then?
That was the other thing. All of this wrangling over the vote, and it's 3-3, and it's deadlocked, and it's hours and hours and hours. And the next day, Nina Johnson, Paul Casey, they put out a press release saying we're closing the parking lots. If city staff can do that on its own, why put it in the hands of
which effectively shuts down the big problem they were worried about, which is everybody from Orange County and San Diego and LA coming north, coming to Santa Barbara. But then the county flip-flops too. What was that about?
Well, the county said that they saw such a large number of cases on Wednesday that they decided to close the county beaches. But again, it doesn't make sense because anybody with a pulse knew. We knew a week ago. We knew at least Saturday, Sunday, there's going to be a lot of people in town next weekend. We should probably close the beaches. It's not science. It's not difficult.
I was surprised that Mike Jordan was kind of on the keep them open side, as well as Eric Friedman. Go ahead.
Well, they were on the keep it open side, which I also have questions about now that we're getting to that, is because they were like, how the hell is that actually going to be enforced? Like, there's just really not, there's not going to be enough sheriff personnel and people on horseback at every beach in the county to actually enforce.
I got some horses they can use.
Yeah, I've heard. But I mean, that was my kind of issue too, was the fact that we're not fully closing the beaches. We have this stipulation that you can do exercise in the water or walk back and forth from the water, but you can't actually lay down or something. I think that's nearly impossible to enforce. That was another question I asked the county was, you know, Ventura did that early on in the pandemic. Clearly it failed, because if it hadn't failed, why would they not still be employing that now? Now they currently just shut the beaches all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I asked, what was the dialogue around that between Ventura County and Santa Barbara County? What did we learn from them? Why are we choosing to do this for our county? And the answer was, we don't know why they stopped doing it.
Right. So, two questions, and I haven't seen any reporting on it. I'm just wondering if you guys have heard anything about these two things. One, obviously, although the center of the pandemic in the county is still up in Santa Maria and North County and Lompoc, there's more and more cases that are coming that we're finding in South County. Do we have any idea, you know, is that one super spreader event or what that's about? And then the other thing, we see that in Imperial County and now in Riverside County, the hospitals are overrun. They've run out of beds and they're shipping people elsewhere in the state. Do we know if Cottage or Marion or anybody is taking in patients from elsewhere?
We have 2 from Imperial at Cottage. That's it.
We do.
Yes, but just 2 patients. Although several weeks ago, Josh asked that question, by the way. That's his credit at the
well, it's possible Delaney's like reporting those other stuff, but Van Do Reynoso said to my face yesterday, she entirely dismissed this issue, and she said there's only 4, and I think she literally held up 4. So I don't know what it is, but
there's
she said it's
4
only
that we've received in
from
the county?
Imperial County, and it was a while ago. That's how she said that, but I don't know if Delaney.
And what about the prison? What about Lompoc Prison? Are there people from the prison who are in our local hospitals? Do we know?
Oh, that's not information that we're privy to, and that I've tried to get in the past many times. Yeah, no.
And do we know anything about why the numbers are suddenly increasing in South County? Is it just because of the testing, or is there some event we don't know about?
They didn't specify an event. It's probably just that as COVID goes on longer and longer, people are more comfortable going out and contributing to the economy, and when they see other people in restaurants, they want to be in restaurants, and we're all just kind of more comfortable going back out there in the world. I don't really think it has anything to do with an event, to be honest.
I think it's a combination of the increased testing as well as the fact we've had the reopening now for, I guess, a month.
Yeah.
So people are out, and so we're seeing more of a community spread. So it's all those factors, I think.
All right. And meanwhile, Josh, the news hawk armchair epidemiologist, continues to write, "What's all the fuss? Let's go back to work." Okay.
Well, Jerry, I've been working every day covering the pandemic out in the real world. So some of us don't have the luxury of being.
I'm just, I want to make sure all viewpoints are represented here on Newsmakers TV. Okay, then we had this other big issue at the City Council, which you both wrote about, the 711 North Milpas project, the mired in controversy forever 711 North Milpas project, which now Ed St. George, land developer to the stars, has suddenly appeared as becoming a partner in. And so the City Council did something really extraordinary with the project. Josh, what happened?
City Council decided to enter a development agreement with Alan Bleeker and Ed St. George. So what that means is, rather than having the project go through the typical development approval steps, which can take years, they decided that they were going to work together on a set of terms and they were going to negotiate, and the city would say, hey, sure, we'll enter this development agreement because we believe there's a lot of city benefit potentially. And the developer will say, sure, we'll give you some concessions because you're going to allow me to build a little bit more than I could if I went through the normal
But
process.
this is highly unusual, is it not?
It's highly unusual. It's usually done for large swaths of land that involve the entire community benefiting somehow. Paseo Nuevo, the Fest Parker hotel developments, the hostels, the Chase Palm Park, all of that are things that came from a development agreement. There's talk of a development agreement at La Cumbre Plaza because the developer wants to build housing there. So these are usually larger, epic, iconic type milestone moments in the city. But Ed St. George right now has a lot of power over the city council and the city administrator. And so he knows that he's got a lot of leverage. He started that petition to replace Paul Casey. And he does have, as we talked about, lines to the city council in ways that developers have not
Yeah, it was a
had.
unanimous vote. I mean, nobody opposed it.
Yeah, so they're going to go negotiate now and then come back. We don't know, maybe the city's going to ask for more than Ed and Alan want. That's part of the negotiations. The alternative is Alan Bleeker and Ed have an approved project. They could build what they have right now. The problem is that they're trying to put some affordable housing in, make it a little bit more profitable, change the architecture because everybody disliked the architecture for that spot. So there's a lot of moving parts. But what was just, I think Nick Welsh mentioned it last week, and I was surprised. Like I never would have thought a year ago they would do a development agreement for this one piece of land on Milpa Street.
So Delaney, I find the role of Alejandra Gutierrez very interesting in this. Obviously, it's in her district, and she's been, I guess, talking to Bleeker and subsequently to St. George about it. What do you make of what she's doing? Is this just something to benefit the district in terms of the housing, or how do you kind of break down her involvement?
Yes, that's how she frames it, is that this is her district, and if it means that they're going to be getting some moderately affordable units, then that's what the district needs. It's really interesting because she was one of the many people who was very against the original project.
Right.
So the fact that although this one's now Spanish style rather than modern, it is going to be larger and bigger and still totally out of place architecturally with the rest of Milpa Street. So it's really interesting that she was going hard at the meeting. Like, she was definitely going hard on, just very passionately, that she wanted this project agreement to happen. And she was really trying to convince her fellow council members. At one point, it almost reminded me like I was in a courtroom or something, because she would be talking and she'd go, is it not true that X? Is it not true that we need affordable housing? Is it not true that this? And is it not this? Well, then wouldn't you say that this? Is it fair to say that this? Like, that's kind of how she would talk to kind of persuade her fellow council members to see it her way. It ultimately, you're right, it worked. It was a unanimous vote, though it wasn't a really unanimous agreement throughout the deliberation. Kristen Sneddon was really apprehensive at first. Michael Jordan.
That's unusual.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She was very suspicious. That's probably the best word to describe her take on it. She still voted for it, though, because really the vote was just to create the first term sheet. And if that doesn't really go over well, they might scrap this whole thing. But Mike Jordan was also kind of like, I don't think you guys really, basically he was like, you guys don't know how planning works. And but he said that he wasn't totally against development agreements. And again, he was someone who voted along with everyone. But Alejandra had the leading role in bringing this here and really just passionately trying to get other people to see it the way that she saw it, so that the city could enter into an agreement. And her biggest thing she kind of kept hitting on over and over again was really the men's, besides actually the project itself, was Ed St. George's and Alan Bleeker's personalities, actually, which is kind of a little bit strange to say, but she was really hitting on like, what I've learned the most is that these men are local, and so they care about the issues, and they care about our housing issues, and they care about our low-income workers. And I learned that these men care because they're part of the community. She said that frequently.
So Josh, so just to clarify, so presumably what is the city getting out of this question from this very unusual deal would be the 20 units. Is that going to be all that they're going to get, or is there going to be anything more?
Well, at a minimum, they're going to get affordable housing units. And by affordable, it does not mean subsidized by the government affordable. It means below market rate. So the developer is going to agree to only charge a certain amount. But I mean, these are still going to be new construction, modern. They're still going to be expensive. It's that those people who make between 80 and 120% of the median income. So it's not going to be cheap housing. The city wants more. Like the city, when they go into their negotiations, they're going to ask for more housing, and they're going to ask for more community benefits. So I don't know that we know what that's going to be.
And who negotiates that on behalf of the city?
Well, I think it's going to be Paul Casey and the community development director, who are going to be leading that effort, whoever that is. Yeah. So we're not sure if it's going to be somebody in-house or somebody they're going to do a recruitment.
So Paul Casey sits down with Ed St. George and comes to a meeting of the minds. Is that the way?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to have to be like that. I think they want the building to be smaller. They'll probably want less parking.
They bumped it up, what, 7 or 8 feet?
I think they bumped it up 7 feet, I believe. Yeah, 45 to 52. Yeah. So, right. And that's one of the things Kristen was concerned about as well, was the height of the building. Just, they talk about increasing housing, but making it bigger, does that necessarily mean more units? So there's a lot to be discussed and hashed out. I mean, Alan and Ed are locals. They are people who built their sort of wealth in the community, out of not having much. So when Alejandra is talking about that, she's respecting the fact that Ed grew up as basically a worker, and then a contractor, and then a carpenter contractor, and did all this stuff. So it's a lot different than the people who built the Mark and then flipped it and sold it for a whole bunch of money.
Right. My point is that, like, Kristen was making comments consistently too, in her suspicion of like, I don't really get the motive. Why are you actually doing this? Why wouldn't you, if you can just go pull permits right now, why the hell are you here? And so that was part of, like I said, I felt like I was in court, like Alejandra was trying to convince everyone. So she was asking all of these questions. And one of them was constantly getting to who these developers are and what she believes their motives are, to try to quell any of the apprehensions of her council members.
Yeah, I talked to Alejandra a little bit about it, and she was pushing back against Nick's story, in which, Nick was kind of saying she was being driven by her relationship to St. George, or her political relationship to St. George. She said, she'd been in touch with Bleeker and so on. So I don't know how that played out in the newsroom, but he's not here. So
basically I took the next story on it, how that played out in the newsroom. But but yeah, I can't comment to what Nick's original story alluded to.
They put the story in safer hands, Jerry. That's what happened. I think that just if I can.
Nick is why you better show up. Okay, let me just switch gears before we run out of time. We've had a very extraordinarily, I think, productive grand jury session this year. The civil grand jury writing reports on a lot of really meaty topics and digging into them. And I thought the most intriguing was the one on the marijuana ordinance. You wrote about that, Delaney. Would you agree with me that the bottom line is basically that Doss Williams is a stooge for the marijuana industry?
I would say Doss and Steve, because it doesn't name people and it says two two supervisors. But Dawson, Steve, Lavin, yeah, I think that was one of the points. That was one of the points threaded throughout. There was a massive ethical issue between those two supervisors.
Really, they didn't pull any punches either. I mean,
no, it was very straightforward.
They said they were in the pocket from day one. Yeah, but as the broader issue was that it said that it's really caused this huge rift in the community, and also really disrupted the planning process. So there was real substantive stuff in there that I thought, and you covered it all.
Yes. The second sentence of the whole report was that Santa Barbara County will perhaps forever, or perhaps be changed forever or something, for the worse because of these ordinances. A lot of it did it tackled ethics on so many different levels. And it started out, the report, and a lot of it was kind of born off of this, was the initial ad hoc committee that was formed. Where
Doss.
Yes, exactly. Where only Dawson and Steve were on that committee that was charged with kind of forming how our county was going to deal with cannabis and what the ordinances, how we're going to shape them, right? And normally this would start out on a much bigger public platform. So it was kind of weird in the first place that it was in these small ad hoc committees that were not subject to the Brown Act. The public they were non-public meetings. And within those, one really clear objective that it was its first objective was to create and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but to create a robust stream of cannabis tax revenue for the county.
We were going to create a market here.
Yes, basically money. And so that was the main objective. And so the whole report, a lot of it kind of focuses on that shouldn't be the main objective, but because that was the main objective in the secretive group, that kind of opened the door for all of these different ethical issues to kind of sink in through the cracks. And a lot of it really goes to, I had to find a way to pull this in. A lot of this has to go to what Laura Capps was saying when she was running against Doss for supervisor. And though she lost, one of her main campaign platforms that everyone knew about was that she was going after him for his way of handling cannabis ordinances and saying that there was an ethics problem. And here's this report that comes out and it says, you guys need an ethics committee or a commission to be handling this. This thing points to some emails that were never disclosed to the public between, it doesn't specify if it was Doss or Steve, but likely one of the two, that they were emailing back and forth, and I called it unfettered access to these supervisors when they had things before the board. They had unfettered access to the supervisors, and they even pointed to an email where one of the supervisors was emailing during
the meeting.
Yes, during a meeting saying, what do you think about what this planning staff recommendation was? Almost as if
Doss
lobbyists were actually controlling Doss and Steve, not the other way, or Doss and Steve weren't making the choices, they were. It had a lot of evidence that it pointed to, and that was kind of really the crux of the report, was that
anybody who hasn't read Delaney's story, go back and read it, because it's got a major outrage factor to it. And then, Josh, the grand jury also put out a report on housing and homelessness that was pretty critical of our local worthies.
Well, Jerry, I just hope in any alleged piece you may be writing about Doss and the civil grand jury report that you seek his input for some balance.
Oh, I saw his input. He said it has only one side to it, which is, yes, the side of the public interest, as opposed to his pals and contributors and surf bros. Yeah, go ahead. What about the housing?
The community or the housing report was coupled with a homeless report, which was countywide. But the civil grand jury report, I mean, as you said, Jerry, they've been super impactful this year. And their report called out a lot of the challenges that Santa Barbara has with building affordable housing, and basically saying that they are reactive, and they acknowledge all the work that the housing authority does, but That's sort of a separate arm. That's a different kind of affordable housing. Santa Barbara has not really done much until recently with their AUD program to try to build apartments and build stuff by design, which is more affordable. And so the housing report called out the city for all of its various structural barriers, lack of vision, inability to identify sites for housing. And it was basically along that whole narrative of Santa Barbara's sort of been asleep at the wheel, at least when it comes to identifying sites for construction and being proactive, separate from the housing authority, which everyone sort of agrees does a really good job.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you, Josh and Delaney, and thank you all for watching. And we will be back next Friday with yet another edition of Newsmakers TV, Journal of the Plague Year. Thanks.